Hi everyone and welcome back to my channel. For those who are new here, my name is Nikki. I'm an author and editor and I post videos here on YouTube about writing, editing, reading and anything else that I love. Today's video I'm very excited about because it's a tag I have just created myself. Always good fun, and it allows me to combine some of my favourite things. For those who watch my videos, you'll know that as well as being a huge reader, I am also a big fan of musical theatre. And I really wanted a way to combine those two in a vlog, and so I thought what better tag than to look at musicals based on books. So that's what we're doing today. We've got 10 questions here. I will pop them below and might as well kick off. I've got my Les Mis top on here, as you can see, so I am all prepared. Number 1, my favourite musical based on a classic. Well, it's quite interesting that I'm wearing my Les Mis top because I would say Les Miserables probably is my top contender for that spot. It's a brilliant adaptation, not least because of the way it skillfully condenses the story. Les Mis is a really big book and there's a lot of characters, there are a lot of characters involved, and I liked the way the musical eliminated some of them. It worked very well, it was cleverly done, and the music's great. It's a show I've seen live over 20 times, I think close to 25 times. It is probably the one I've seen the most in terms of how many times I've been to performances, and it's always going to have a very dear place in my heart. However, I would like to give an honourable mention too in this question to The Grinning Man, which I saw only earlier this year. It's a new musical that opened in London. It ran for about 5 months. Previous to that, premiered in Bristol at the Old Vic there. And it's based on Victor Hugo's L'Homme qui rit, The Man Who Laughs. A wonderful story. It's the best new musical I've seen in a long time. Heart-aching music, lots of drama. It was a show that made you laugh 1 second and then you were in tears the next. Again, a very skillful adaptation. It changes the story a little bit more than Les Mis. Les Mis is really just condensing, whereas in The Grinning Man they do change the plot a bit, but the way it's done works really well for that stage version. So I don't have a problem with changes in adaptations as long as it's done in a way that works for the film and makes it, or the musical in this case, and makes it a better piece. I can't even speak today, I don't know what I'm saying. But I'm not going to edit this because it's just fun. You can all see me struggle. What I'm trying to say is that I don't mind if adaptations change things about the novel if it's done for the right reasons, essentially. I'll stop blabbering about it, but that is essentially what I'm trying to say. And The Grinning Man is one of those examples where they do it very well and it works very well. Moving swiftly along, and hopefully my ability to speak the English language will improve people as we move through the video. Number 2, my favourite musical based on a modern novel, and for modern novels I'm considering anything post-1900. And for this one I would actually pick the Austrian musical Rebecca, based on the book of the same name by Daphne du Maurier. Again, it's a very beautifully done adaptation. It stays pretty close to the book, although in some ways it's closer to the film, because the film did change a few things. And it's got some very memorable songs. It's a story I love anyway, and I think it was handled very well musically in this piece. It's by a couple of composers who have done a few other Austrian musicals as well, and all their stuff is always great. So some great songs, a really nice adaptation. If you don't speak German but you know the story of Rebecca, you'd be able to watch it and you'd have no trouble understanding what was going on. It's very true to the book. Number 3, favourite musical based on a Shakespeare play. There's a few contenders for this one, however my top choice after a bit of consideration last night is West Side Story. I don't think you can go past Bernstein's brilliant adaptation of Romeo and Juliet. Aside from the music, just the way they handled the adaptation, changing the setting, worked so well, and it's just going to be one of those that always stands the test of time, I think. However, at this point I would like to also just give a couple of honourable mentions. Kiss Me Kate obviously is another very clever adaptation, and I also really love the French version of Romeo and Juliet. Number 4, a musical that's better than the book. This one was an easy one for me, and it's definitely Jekyll and Hyde by Frank Wildhorn. I actually hadn't read the book of Jekyll and Hyde, although I knew the story, before I saw the musical, or first heard the musical on CD. And I absolutely fell in love with the musical. It's got some great songs. And I went to read the book, and I was actually really disappointed about the lack of the female characters, because the female characters of Lucy and Emma really make up the musical. The sort of two women in Jekyll's life. And they're just pretty much absent from the book, really. And I just thought the musical had a much more exciting story, had a nice romantic subplot, and in that way I think it improves upon the book. 5. A musical adaptation near miss. So what I mean by this is one that had potential and perhaps didn't quite live up to what it could have been. For this one I would pick the musical of Lord of the Rings, which I saw in London back in 2007, I think it was, so just over 10 years ago now. This musical had a lot going for it. It had stunning staging, beautiful costume design. However, I think it was a mistake to try to condense Lord of the Rings into a single sort of 2.5, 3 hour piece. They had to cut so much, which was an issue to begin with, because there's a lot of stuff in Lord of the Rings you can trim, as the film showed us, but there's also a lot that you do need there. And the other issue I had with it was the music, and they actually had 2 different sets of composers working on this piece. They had a group who, from memory, I think were Finnish, who did all the elven songs, and those are stunning. Galadriel gets 2 brilliant songs, Arwen gets a brilliant piece. There's quite a nice duet with her and Aragon, which I believe was written by that Finnish group too, although I may be wrong in that one. But the elven music I loved. The other music for the Hobbits I didn't adore as much. I found it a little bit twee, and they gave them all these really stupid country bumpkin accents as well. And coupled with the music, I just found the Hobbit songs a bit irritating. And so you had this sort of diorama almost going on, this duality of, you had one half the music was gorgeous, the other half you were just going, oh for goodness sake. And brilliant staging though, absolutely stunning staging. So I think it had so much potential, but I think musically they let themselves down by going off in 2 different directions and then trying to put them together. And in terms of the staging and adaptation, I think it was a bit too much to try and do it in one show. I think, you know, maybe if they could have done it in a 2-part thing, a bit like they did the Harry Potter and the Cursed Child recently, perhaps that would have worked a bit better. But it's just a shame because it did have some great things about it, but overall it didn't completely come together. 6, my least favourite musical adaptation. I think it's got to be Heathcliff, the Cliff Richard musical, Cliff Richard penned musical, based on Wuthering Heights, in which he also starred as Heathcliff. This is a show that I have a sort of love-hate relationship with in a way, because the songs are actually fairly catchy, and now and again I do find myself with one of them stuck in my head. But overall, the show was really just a vehicle for Cliff Richard, and Heathcliff was the only character who was really given any decent stage time. Even Cathy was relegated to a bit of a 2-dimensional non-entity. Certainly Isabella and Edgar were. And I think for me it was just not a very thoughtful adaptation of the deeper sense of Wuthering Heights. I mean, it covered the story, but I don't think emotionally it was quite strong enough. And interestingly enough, there's also a musical of Wuthering Heights by Bernard J. Taylor, in which on the CD Dave Willett sang Heathcliff and Leslie Garrett sang Cathy. And that too has its problems. It's got a few catchy songs, but something about it doesn't quite work. And I just wonder if Wuthering Heights perhaps isn't one that people should attempt to adapt to a musical. I mean, I don't think anyone's ever completely got it right adapting it to a film. So I think a musical is perhaps a bit too much of an ask. But Heathcliff of the 2 is the one I would pick as my least favourite adaptation. A book that would make a great musical. I actually have 2 picks for this one. One's a classic and one's a modern one, so I hope you'll bear with me. For the classic, I would say Clarissa, which if you watch some of my other vlogs you might have heard me talking about recently. It's by Samuel Richardson. It's an epistolary novel from the 18th century about a young woman who, to escape from a family trying to force her to marry a man she doesn't care for, ends up throwing herself into the power of Lovelace, who is a notorious rake. And I think there's a lot of potential here. In some ways it's a little bit similar to Liaison Dangereuse, which was made into a fairly successful opera. So I think there's definitely musical potential in Clarissa here. I think you can get some really great moments between her and Lovelace, and great solos as they ponder their positions, and you can have an epic duel to end it all. So I think it could work. And for the more modern one, I picked Greyfire, the first book in the Vampire Empire series by Clay and Susan Griffith. Again, I think there's great potential here. I think it could be a sort of a bit of a rock pop kind of musical. There's potential for some awesome duets between Adele and Greyfriar Gareth, and there's going to be some great swashbuckling sword fighting. There's some awesome staging opportunities with airships and castles, and overall I think it could work really well. It would be a slightly melodramatic, over-the-top action musical, and vampires too, you know, who doesn't love a good vampire musical? 8. The worst book to turn into a musical. I had a good ponder about this one because there were quite a few contenders. However, I've decided that my choice will be 120 Days of Sodom by the Marquis de Sade, which I have sitting on my shelf down here. Can't see it working, can you? I mean, I think legally and morally there'd be too much protest. You wouldn't be able to have child actors. They'd never let them do some of the very dubious stuff that goes on in the book. I don't think it's going to make a very good musical. Question 9. An underappreciated musical adaptation. For this one, I'm going to pick Angela Lloyd Webber's The Woman in White, based on the novel by Wilkie Collins. I think this musical got a bit of a bad rap. It wasn't perfect. I'll grant you that. It had its problems, but overall it was enjoyable. I can't remember if I only saw it once or if I got to it twice in the run, but I find the music enjoyable. I actually liked it in some ways better than the book. This was almost a contender for that category too, although Jekyll and Hyde won in my mind. But it has some really good moments. I love the characterisation of Sir Percival Glyde in it, and it's the staging. He was trying some new things with the staging, with projection and that, and it didn't 100% work, but it was quirky and it was interesting to see something new being done. And overall, I just think it was a little bit underappreciated. I think it had more good qualities than people gave it credit for. Finally, the last question, number 10, an overrated musical adaptation. This could be a slightly contentious answer that I'm about to give, but for me it's The Wizard of Oz. I think it's never been one of my favourites, I have to say. There's odd songs I like, but as an overall piece, I'm not hugely enamoured of it. You can see how little I am in love with it by the fact that it was playing here in Adelaide just a few weeks ago, and Anthony Wallow was in it as the wizard, and I am a huge Anthony Wallow fan. Normally if Anthony Wallow had come to town, I would have been pretty keen to go and see the show. But not even Anthony Wallow could make me that keen to spend my money on The Wizard of Oz. Especially, I know they gave him an extra song because he's such a big star, but essentially he's not one of the main characters. He's not going to be on stage that much either. So I didn't rush out to see it, and I just think it's one of those films that's put on a pedestal, like, oh, The Wizard of Oz, isn't it one of the best musicals ever? And it's like, well, it's nothing awful, but for me it would never make any of my top musicals lists. So that's why I think it is a little bit overrated these days. So that was the Musical Theatre and Books tag. I hope you've had fun listening to it. I had a huge amount of fun making it and thinking up the questions. So great to be able to combine two of my biggest passions in one vlog. If you'd like to do the tag, consider yourself tagged. I'm not going to name anyone, but if you're as big a theatre and book fan as I am and you want to give it a go, please do. The questions, as I said, I will pop below in the little spiel, and I look forward to seeing some of your responses if you decide to go ahead and film. That's all from me for today. I'll be back again very soon with another vlog, and I look forward to seeing you all then. Bye for now, everyone.